in St. Matthew's Gospel, the Gospel according to St. Matthew, in chapter 27. And I'd like to begin reading at about verse 39. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and he will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. And the thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there when they heard that said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. Then the rest said, Let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. I want you to look at somebody and ask them, what next do I have to go through? Amen. Somebody who's in the middle of a whole lot of stuff, just look at the neighbor and say, what's coming next? Lord have mercy. You cannot go to Calvary at all without giving some thought to the struggle in the garden, and actually to understand the struggle in the garden as a prelude to the cross. I think it's important because there is a connection that is very strong between self-will and God's will. And I suggest to you, and what great singing, Brother Reynolds, and I suggest to you, yes, what great singing. And I suggest to you that there is greater tension between God's will and your will than there is the tension between righteousness and unrighteousness. It seems that when you consider Jesus in the wilderness, you will notice that he exhibited greater power than when he was in the garden. And that's a wonderful thing to argue, and that is that oftentimes you exhibit more power in the wilderness than you do in the garden. But in this case, he exhibited more pain in the garden than he did in the wilderness. I wonder, did I confuse you, or are you still following? It seems to us that our great trial and our great time of difficulty is generally when we have wilderness experiences. But it seems in this case it was in the garden. I would like to associate the garden with peace and the wilderness with struggle. And maybe, just maybe, there is a message in there, and I'm having an epiphany this moment, that maybe we seem to fail more in the garden than we do in the wilderness. Maybe we are more prepared for the struggle of the wilderness than we are for the struggle in the garden. It's one thing to struggle when things all around you are negative. It's another thing to struggle in a pleasant environment. I might have to work on that on another time because I'm feeling that right now. How many times have you failed in the garden and overcome in the wilderness? How many times did you not get through the easier environmental thing and you were able to overcome the hard environmental thing? I play pool every now and then when I get a chance, and sometimes I make a shot that is ridiculously difficult to make and miss the chippy. I don't know, have you ever experienced that? But I have seen the basketball players make ridiculous shots that call for all of their physicality. And then here's a fella laying the ball up all over the basket, all on the back. And oftentimes, the place where you're expected to have victory, you don't. And the place where you're expected to capitulate and fall apart, you stand. And so what Jesus is showing us, that it has anything really to do with where you are. It just happens to do with what your assignment is. Oh, I feel something pushing me here. I hope I didn't peek out in the second service and fall out in the third, but I'll be all right by the help of God. It's important to understand this. It's very important to see that before you operate in your purpose, there are certain things you have to reconcile in your mind. I don't know, have you ever had to do something that was significantly important? It was a decision that was a life-affecting decision. It wasn't something that you could take or leave. It was something that was going to make you or break you. And oftentimes you seek prayer, and my discernment tells me that sometimes people aren't seeking prayer because they want to know what to do. Oftentimes my discernment tells me that people know what to do, but they're just seeking prayer for the